So I can tell you from my personal experience, one of the best educated lessons I got was when I got to meet Trump. So I interviewed Trump 4 different times as a journalist, spent like 2.5 hours with him in the Oval Office, not alone, but like me and one person and like the press secretary. And that was it. So I actually got to observe him. And as a guy who reads these types of books, right? And, you think of Trump, obviously, most people, what they see on television, in articles and more. But being able to observe it like one-on-one, I was closer to him than I am right now from you. That was one of the most educational experiences I got because it's like you just said. The look, the leaning forward, the way he talks, the way he is a master at taking the question and answering exactly which part he wants. And then if you try and follow up, he's like, excuse me, he knows. And then whenever you're talking, it's not that he's annoyed about getting interrupted. If he realizes he's been meandering and then you interrupt him, all good. But if he's driving home a point, which he has to make sure appears in your transcript or whatever, it's like, it really was fascinating for me to look at. And what was also crazy with Trump is I realized how much he was living in the moment. So like when I went to the Oval, I've read all these biographies and like I walk in and I'm like, holy shit. Like I'm in the Oval Office.
Well, you interviewed him in the Oval Office?
In the Oval, every time was in the Oval Office.
You scared shitless? Sorry.
Well, I wasn't scared. I was just, look, it's the Oval Office, right? I mean, I'm this nerd who's like this kid. I will admit this here. Like I printed out on my dad's label maker when I was like 7 and I wrote like the Oval Office on my bedroom. So I was like, a huge nerd, like obviously egomaniacal, even from 7. But so like for this, I mean, it was huge, right? I'm like this 25-year-old kid and like I walk in there and like I see the couch, right? And I'm like, oh man, like that's Kissinger. Like, and I'm like, that's where like Kissinger and Nixon got on their knees. And then you see over by the door and you're like, are the scuff marks still there from when Eisenhower used to play golf? This is all running through my mind. Yeah. With Trump, none of it was there. Yeah. None of it, right? So like,
it's all in the moment.
Even the desk, like I put my phone on the desk to record. Yeah. And I'm like, this is the fucking Resolute desk. I'm like, I shouldn't put my phone on this thing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, HMS Resolute, all that, national. And even for him, he doesn't think about any of it. It was like amazing to me. Like he had this portrait of Andrew Jackson right next to I think from on the fireplace, like right here on the right. And the most revealing question was when I was like, Mr. President, what are people going to remember you for in 100 years? And he was like, he was like, I don't know, like Veterans Choice. He like has a list in front of him of like his accomplishments, which is
good question, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah. And he's like Veterans Choice. And I remember looking at him being like, it's not going to be better. Like I'd be like, I'm looking at you, Donald Trump, the harbinger of something new.
Yeah.
We still don't know what the hell it is. And so I realized with these guys and their charisma and more is that they don't think about themselves the way that we think about them. Mm-hmm. And that was actually important to understand because a lot of people are like, Trump is playing all this chess. I'm like, I assure you, he's not. Like he's truly living. One time I was interviewing him and he had like a certificate that he had to sign or something on his desk. He's like it was like a child almost. Like he got distracted by it. He was like, oh, what's this? He starts like picking up and I was like, wow, like this is the guy. Like this is what he is.
Well, I wonder if there was a different person because you were recording than offline at a party.
I can tell you. Yes. Well, here's the thing though, because that's another part of it. Because that 2 hours, I would say like half of that was not on the record. Mm-hmm. So like whenever he's off the record, he changes completely, right? I don't want to like go into too much of it or whatever, but like he is so mindful of when that camera is on and when the mic is hot in terms of the language that he uses, what he's willing to admit, what he's willing to talk about, how he's willing to even appear in front of his staff. I think the most revealing thing Trump ever did was there was this press conference like right after he lost right after the midterm elections in 2018. And one of the journalists was like, Mr. President, thank you for doing this press conference. And he looks at him and he goes, it's called earned media. It's worth billions. he just like had so much disdain for him because he's like, I'm not doing this for you. He's like, I'm doing this for me.
So he's really aware of the narrative of the story. I mean, the people have talked about that all comes from the tabloid media from New York and so on. He's a master of that. But I've also heard stories of just in private, he's a really, I don't want to overuse the word charismatic, but just like he is a really interesting, almost like friendly, like a good person. Like yeah, like that's what I heard. I've heard actually surprising the same thing about Hillary Clinton. Uh, and like
that I can't tell you anything about. Yeah.
but like the way they present themselves is perhaps very different than they are as human beings, one on one. That's something. Maybe that's just like a skill thing. Maybe the way they present themselves in public is actually their I mean, almost their real self, and they're just really good in private, one on one, to go into this mode of just being really intimate in some kind of human way.
I think that's part of it because I would notice that with Trump. You know, he's almost like a tour guide. It was very like it's very crazy, right? Because you're in the Oval. I mean, it's his office, and he's like, do you guys want anything? He's like, you want a Diet Coke because he drinks like all this Diet Coke.
That's awesome.
You know, and then,
great, unapologetic.
Yeah, he's just like he's like, you guys want a Diet Coke, right? And you're sitting there, and you're like, the way he's able to like the last time I interviewed him, he wanted to do it outside. Because he's studied himself from all angles and he knows exactly how he looks on a camera and with which lighting. Mm-hmm. And so we were supposed to interview him on camera in the Oval Office, which is actually rare. Like you don't usually get that. And they ended up moving it outside at the last minute. And he came out and he's like, I picked this spot for you. He's like, great lighting. Yeah, I was like, you are your own like lighting director.
Yeah.
You're the president. Right?
It's great.
It's so funny. But it's like you said, he's very charismatic and friendly. I mean, you wouldn't know. I mean, look, this is what I mean in terms of the dynamism of these people that gets lost. And I think even he knows that. Like, I don't think he would want that side of him that you see in those off the record moments and more in order to come out because he's very keen about how exactly he presents to the public. It's like, even his presidential portrait, everybody usually smiles and he refused to smile. He was like, I want to look like Winston Churchill, like even he knew that.